The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. This is Bryan for Breaking Down Security. This week and next will be a two-part event with Tanya Janca. She's been on our show before, but she's always a great interview, and we're just glad that she could take the time to come and talk to us. A lot has happened in her world since we last talked to her. She was had set up She Hacks Purple, and now it's called We Hack Purple. That was also bought by a company called BrakeSec, and she's continued doing everything that she's wanted to do up until now, and is doing a kick-ass job of it. We talked to her this week and next about API security. We talk a little bit about content development. We just talk about all kinds of stuff because, I just want to pick her brain from a content development point of view, being a content manager, a developer relations person, and, an all-around awesome person. And so we had a few issues on this stream. One, the first about 7 minutes, we had some audio issues. My OBS was causing all kinds of problems with the output from Zoom. And, we missed her talking a little bit about herself. So I'm going to read a short bio here that does not do her justice because she's, like I said, awesome. We also talked a little bit about training at the beginning here, and where you'll hear us come in, and where I fix the audios, where we reiterate some issues about training. And there's a couple of cutouts. Her internet is at the time we recorded this was being super flaky and cutting out. So I've tried to do a couple of jump cuts where those were. We had about a 5 to 10 second drop every time it went out. And it is what it is. This is a live we recorded it live, so, you roll with the punches. So Tanya Janca, also known as She Hacks Purple on Twitter. She Hacks Purple is a best-selling author of Alice and Bob Learn Application Security. We talked about a little bit about that. Her book is actually in talks to be used at a university or a college for, teaching coders how to code more securely, which is amazing. And it's really awesome. That was some of the part that we didn't get in the audio, I believe. So really excited to hear about her book being used as curriculum to help create the next generation of coders and to teach them properly. She's the founder of We Hack Purple, an online learning academy, community, and podcast that revolves around teaching everyone to create secure software. Tanya has been coding and working for in IT for over 20 years, winning countless awards, and she's been everywhere from startups to public service to tech giants, Microsoft, Adobe, and Nokia. She has worn many hats: startup founder, pen tester, CISO, AppSec engineer, and software developer. She's an award-winning public speaker, active blogger, and streamer, and has delivered hundreds of talks and trainings on 6 continents. I can't say that. I haven't talked on 6 continents, but yeah. She values diversity, inclusion, and kindness, which shines through in her countless initiatives. Go. Hope you have a listen on this. We jump in about the point where we're talking about training and secure coding of developers. And yeah, we're looking forward to this next series of shows. So hope you enjoy, and have a great day.
So if we step back a bit, basically I was talking about how people learn in different ways.
Right.
And the older someone is, and specifically rather than age, the longer they've been out of school and the longer that they have not been learning for, the harder it is for them to remember how to learn. And so Specifically, I designed all my training and book to try really hard to accommodate people that learn in different ways. And that's why we made an audiobook, because normally they don't make audiobooks out of technical books. And I had to really talk them into it. There might have been some begging. And I was like, the reason for this, and the same reason, like we always have closed captioning and all these other accessibility things, is I want every single person who wants to learn to be able to learn.
Right.
That's super important to me.
You know, it's funny. I have tried several books to learn how to code Python, and, you know, I've tried to, you know, learn Ruby and all these things. And I don't work in a development background. You know, it has been difficult for me to learn how to do programming. I mean, I have, that's one reason I never went into programming, because it was like, I would have to start at square one again, which is why I'm now just a filthy PM. But so I appreciate the need there. I mean, I'm pretty good at math and science, and, you know, I'm okay with computers, but yeah, it's always been languages that's given me a problem. Even like, you know, I've done Duolingo. I've got, you know, I've had several hundred, you know, days in a row of learning French or Spanish or whatever. It just leaves me, you know. It's probably the immersion thing, but yeah, I definitely can appreciate the need and to teach and learn in a different way. And we talked about a little bit about that with Wolf Gorlick on you know, as adults we don't learn as quickly or as fast as you know, high school people, but we build our training based on the fact that we're all still in high school and we can pick things up like this, you know. So it does make a lot of sense that we have to learn differently, and if we have learning disabilities. Or different ways of seeing things, or we don't grok it immediately, having a different, you know, point of view or a different direction in which to come at that thing makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So I'd like to thank Ghosts Are Spooky. I did gift Ghosts Are Spooky a subscription. So I appreciate that. Cool. When can we expect to see your book available?
Yeah. And I also, did I disappear? I'm sorry. December,
no, that's okay.
2023.
December 2023. Okay, I'll be in San Diego then, but I will definitely put it on my Amazon preview list. Is it who's publishing it for you?
Wiley. So Wiley published my first book, and they're really good to me. So I talked to a lot of other publishers, and they said they'd like to publish me, but it can't be named Alice and Bob, and I can't have those silly characters on the front, and I can't do this, and I can't. And I was like, oh, so you want me to write someone else's book?
Right.
No.
Right. Well, Alice and Bob aren't aardvarks or weasels or some kind of large stoat or something like that. And other publishing companies don't do audiobooks, which is kind of interesting as well. So, yeah. You know, if you could get Bob to become a giant stoat, then, you know, you might be solid on that. But yeah.
I think
so. Go ahead.
The characters lead back to when people invented encryption, and that's like how they used to explain things. But part of the thing that I did with Alice and Bob is I made Alice an Indian woman, because India, you might not be aware, is the only country where there's gender parity in IT. There's just as many women as there are men. And they'll tell little girls, like, you're going to be such a great software developer when you grow up. And there's tons and tons of women in IT in India, and it's totally amazing. And I'm like, why can't we do that over here?
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to kind of like tip my hat to all the totally kick-ass ladies in India. And so a lot of them noticed.
Very cool. Yeah. I work with, at my company, I work with a lot of very amazing people and a lot of underrepresented groups. You wouldn't know that they were underrepresented at the group, the company I work at, because I mean, we have such a diverse workforce, but I could definitely see that being not indicative of the entire industry. So, but yeah, it's good that we're making those inroads across our organizations, but we still have a long way to go with that. So, So for those of you who are here, the She Hacks Purple, you know, training, we talked a little bit about earlier because you couldn't hear Tanya. All the training on her site is free. And I think it's shehackspurple.dev.
It's wehackpurple.com.
Wehackpurple.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we rebranded and it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it was shehackspurple.dev, and the .dev gave us all sorts of problems because Google bought the parent domain and then forced CSPS on everyone. And because we have all these different SaaS products, it wasn't doing the TLS handshake quite the way Google wanted, and we throw security errors, so we had to abandon our domain. Thanks, Google. Yeah, and so then we changed it also to We Hack Purple because some men would write me and they would say, it's really cool you do this for women, but I wish I could go to your school. I'm like, oh no, everyone's invited. I am so sorry. So it was good we rebranded so everyone knew that they're all invited.
Oh, very cool. Okay. WeHackPurple.com. There you go.
And if you join the community, it's free. And all of our courses are free. And in around 2 weeks, we're adding a brand new free course. And it is by, so I've been working with the folks from Bridge Crew. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but they were acquired by Palo Alto a little while ago. And they make a bunch of products that help you with infrastructure as code. So they made an entire course that's free with, I think, 6 modules about what is infrastructure as code, things you can do to secure it, how you could automate that in a CI/CD pipeline, and best practices. And so we just got all the videos yesterday, and we've been like going through it and like putting it all into our community. And I'm really excited for that because like they donated this whole thing to us. And I think that's really, I'm very grateful. I think that's really awesome of them.
Nice. Okay. So one of the
they worked really hard on it.
Very nice. Content creation is something that obviously I'd like to think that I do. But what does the career look like for folks that want to get into content creation? I do have people who ask me, "Hey, I'm thinking about setting a podcast or whatever," and I was like, I can only tell you what my experience is, and the Twitch thing that I'm doing right now is fairly new. But is there an industry for creating stuff? I mean, what does it take to actually do that? Do you have to have a real big production studio, or how you've done it to great effect? Obviously, you've been very successful at We Hack Purple, and then you got bought by BrakeSec and whatever. So there's definitely some value, and they saw real value in that. What does it take for somebody to build a body of knowledge or to be a content creator for security? I mean, how did that come about for you?
So some of it came about by accident. So I started speaking at conferences in full honesty because I just wanted a free ticket really badly. Okay. And I was like, I will work all the weekends for like 3 months to make a talk, practice it 55,000 times and submit it just so I can get in free. Because I was working for the Canadian government and I was changing from software development into InfoSec. And basically with the Canadian American exchange and most of the training that I felt was high quality being charged in American dollars, I kid you not, Brian, with the exchange, it's 20% of my take-home pay at that time for the whole year. Like once you take taxes off, it would be 20% of my take-home. And I was just, for one course, I'm like, I'm sorry, that's impossible. I cannot do that. And so I was like, I'm going to cheat the system. And then I started speaking at all these conferences, and then I would sit there and just learn from all these other brilliant people at the conference. And then I was an OWASP chapter leader, and they used to save a seat in every training for a leader. And so the first day it would come out, I would be like right in there, like wait on right. So I'm like, I'm going to be the first person, and I would get a seat. And so I would scrimp and save and share hotel rooms and all sorts of other things so that I could afford to do these trainings so that I could learn. And so I started creating talks for that reason. Then I got hired by Microsoft, and they're like, could you start doing that for us? Do the same thing you're doing, but say you work for us. And I was like, I can do that. And then someone at Microsoft dared me to start a blog. I kid you not, it was a dare. And he dared our entire team to start a blog. And he's like, if you write one article a month for 4 months and you don't have at least 40 readers, I can't remember what he said he would do, like he'd buy me dinner or something. And I was like, it's on, Brock. I'm like, I'm going to show you. And then I had like hundreds of readers after 4 months. I was like, Oh, I had no idea. And I was like, well, I'm not like this formal technical writer. He's like, write about something that you think is cool, that when you learned it, you were like, that was so neat. Write about a thing that when you learned, you thought it was awesome. And I remember when I made my first talk, my professional mentor, like I have several, but one of them, Sharif Kusa, he's like, what did you just most recently learn? And I was like, how to scan a web app with a DAS tool, dynamic scanner. And he's like, make your first talk about that. I'm like, no, but that's lame. Everyone already knows that. He's like, did you know that 2 months ago? I'm like, no. And he's like, do you think it's cool now? I'm like, yes. And he's like, there's all these people that don't know it yet. And you can show them. And it'd be so much easier than the way you had to learn, fooling around on your computer yourself for hours at a time. So show them all the stuff you learned, show them all the things you think are cool, warn them about the things you screwed up. And then people liked it. I gave that talk like 20 times. And so, but you have to like love doing it because you don't make very much money. Me going to conferences and stuff, I blew all my vacation for like 3 years doing that, and like all my extra funds for plane tickets and things like that. And like when you write a blog, sometimes I'll post, like medium.com will send me a check. It'll be like $2.81 for like 4 months of my blog. Yeah, I'm like, I'm rich. Let's do this. I'm going to buy a pack of gum.
You could buy a tall, Starbucks, but
No, I don't think I could afford that.
Yeah. I have often, there's a lot of folks out there that do Twitch stuff and they'll do regular things. And I was like, oh, maybe there's companies out there who would hire content developers. And I looked at job descriptions and I was like, wow, they're making less than half what I make. And it's like, but their impact, you could argue their impact of their content is more valuable than the stuff that, I'm doing as a TPM or whatever, because they have a greater reach. And it's kind of a weird disparity there where it's like, they're making more impact than I am, but they're getting paid less than half of what I'm making, which is sad. And it just really weird. Really weird.
I think it depends on what you're doing, because I'm doing developer relations now. And I would say that pays as much as like a software developer would be paid, maybe even a bit more. But you create content, but you also do all these other things. So when you do developer relations, for instance, I'm constantly getting feedback from customers or from, I'll hold this huge workshop and one person will find this weird, super unusual bug and then I'll report it. Or a bunch of clients will be like, we don't like this for whatever reason. And then I work with the product team to help them fix that. Or I'm like, writing documentation or tutorial, which is not necessarily the most exciting part of my job, but sometimes it needs to get done. And so there's all these different parts of being a developer relations person that you don't see. And then sometimes you have an interesting day like yesterday where I just wrote a blog post and pushed it out right away because I was inspired. And so when people are like, oh, you can do content creation, you're going to make so much money, blah, blah, blah. I ran the academy for 2 years and I would say we broke even on the academy. I would make all of the money on enterprise training. Like I would come in for a day, charge $1 zillion, 40 people, train them all up, answer all the questions, get them like really excited about security and then leave. I'd get paid a ton for that. But then the academy, with how much staff that I needed to maintain it, to create the content, to market and advertise the content, I would say that it just above break even every year. Right. And so I'm running the community as well, like just to pay all the staff and everything. But then I sold it. This giant community and tons of content and tons of followers and this very well-respected brand. And so it depends on what you're trying to do. So a lot of people are like, yeah, if you just make these online courses, you're going to make tons of money. I'm like, 99% of people don't even break even. Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't know that. But like, if you're going to go and like, if making content is really your passion and you want to do it full time, if you do developer relations, that's a good paying job. You get to make lots of content, but you also get to do things that really, I feel like, matter. So I get to do really good, kind things that I get to put out into the world as a developer advocate, because I'll have, so I'm currently working with a big conference to give free training all day to people from underrepresented groups. And I can't mention it yet because it's not 100% confirmed. But basically, there's going to be all sorts of paid training. And then me and another person are going to give like a full training all day for free to anyone from an underrepresented group so that they can have access too. And that's a cool thing I get to do because I have a full-time paycheck from the company I'm working for, right?
Nice.
But individually, privately, when you're running your own company, I'm like, I can't afford that. I can't fly to another city. You know, the 3 days it's going to take because 2 days of travel and 1 day of training, you know, all the organization and administrative time. I'm just like, this is going to cost me like $20,000 to do, and I can't afford it. And so there's like pros and cons of all the things. And so if you're going to do content full time and start your own company, a thing I would say to people is be aware that intellectual property can be stolen. I literally report my book at least like once a week of a place where it's being stolen. People will actually download your courses and then upload them to Udemy and say they wrote them and charge money for your course, even though like this face is on it. Right. Right. And so there's like all these things that they don't tell you about when they're trying to sell you their product that happens to be a place that hosts online courses. So like pros and cons about that. If anything, though, when you're doing content creation and doing all this stuff, one, you can get contracts to create content creation. You can endorse things, which I do very, very, very rarely because I'm obsessive about the quality of the thing I endorse. So you can end up making money off of a lot of other things. So for instance, my book took 2 years and it took 1 year of really hard work to write and edit it. And then the first year was mostly just like research and making sure I had comprehensive stuff, but then like writing several days a week, editing forever. And then I would say I've made close to $16,000 on it. That's nothing. Walmart greeters make more money.
That is true. That is
for a 2-year project, many, many hours per week. But that book has opened doors for me. So for instance, there's a community college in Canada that is thinking of like licensing all my content so that they can teach security the We Hack Ripple way to all their students. I'm like, yes, this is awesome. This is what I wanted. And I'm not going to make a lot of money off of it, but my focus is spreading knowledge and sharing. If your focus is to make tons of money, I don't know if content creation is the way you want to go.
Yeah. Well, and plus, you know, if several hundred people learn the correct way of coding or the correct way to secure an API, which I do promise we will get to, it's being paid forward in one way or another. And somebody will be like, oh yeah, I remember that book, reading it in college. Yeah, that was a great supplement. Oh yeah, I had the 4th edition, which, did whatever. And then, you can always say that you help the next generation of developers and programmers not suck as much. So, and put me out of a job. So hopefully, so.
Yeah, that's what AppSec people do. We want to put ourselves out of a job, 100%.
Yep. Unfortunately, the technology keeps expanding, and I don't see us being out of a job anytime soon. So, yeah. All right. So, one of the reasons we're going to have you here is API security. So, I saw a video of some discussion on API security, and you had a list of 10 things that you had mentioned in that video on API security, and as you do, you explain everything so excellently in that video. Do we have a lot of problems still with APIs? I mean, we do have, you would think I don't want to say they're so simple. They're not always so simple, but is it the fact that they're hard to secure, or developers want to make them more complicated than they need to be?
Okay. So there's a few things. So one, APIs are definitely getting attacked more all the time than ever before. I heard that, so the Verizon breach report comes out every year since 2008. And every year that I've read every year since 2015, but I've checked a few years before, like I've spot checked, but I haven't actually read 100% of the reports since 2008. But each one I checked, insecure software, like insecure web apps, was the #1 cause of data breach. So we really suck.
Okay.
Yeah. So the #1 cause of like attacks and like problems happening is like ransomware and phishing. However, data breaches, which is like actually the most terrifying in my opinion, unfortunately is insecure software. And so they were thinking of breaking it out in web apps and APIs, but then it was #1 and #2. So they're like, forget it. It's just #1. You just all suck.
Right.
So that's not good. And so our APIs difficult than a web app. And just to clarify for people, so API is application programming interface, but basically it's a way, it's service. So I have a front end of a lovely web app, and it's like, you know what? I would like a postal code. Here's the address. Give me your postal code. Am I still with you, or did my internet?
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah.
Okay.
You're good.
Perfect. Okay. So this little web API is sitting there just running, and it's like, oh, would you like a postal code? I'll look that up for you. And then just sends it back. But there's no front end. And quite often there's a whole bunch of them. So one's giving you a postal code, and one of them's giving you the price of that piece of bread that you wanted to buy, and etc. And because they have no front ends, a lot of devs are like, oh, it's not really on the internet. People can't really see it, but yes, we can see it. I remember being in a pen test scoping interview thing with a client, and quite frankly, I was the only woman pen tester at the time in my city. There was another one, but she just worked at a company full time. So I was the only like consulting woman doing pen tests, and I've always looked really young for my age, and just there people judge you by the way that you look. And so they're asking me like all these dumb questions to try to see if I was competent. And so I was like, hey, so while we're scoping, are all of these APIs in scope for this mobile app I'm going to test? And the two devs looked at each other and they're like, how do you know about those? And I was like, well, I just proxied the front of your web app and then like looked at all the calls and just enumerated just on a guess, right? Like, and I wanted it to be in our scoping document. So I didn't test something you didn't want me to test.
Right.
Did I get all of them? Are there any that are out of scope? And they're just like, you should hire her. And I was like,
Nice.
oh, okay, that was pretty good. I passed the test. That's awesome. But like, just because there's no front end doesn't mean that we don't need to secure it. And so a lot of devs have traditionally like been a bit mistaken in thinking that it needs less security, and that's not true. But the other thing is because the dynamic testing tools traditionally have like pretty much sucked at testing APIs. And I work at a dynamic scanning company. So I have some conflict of interest here because I work for one of them. And so years ago, I remember I was working with like a different product, not by these dudes, and it's a good scanner. And I pointed it at an API. I was working full-time doing AppSec at a place that will remain unnamed. But they had made 27 APIs. No one had tested them yet. I'm like, cool, I'm going to test them. And I pointed it at each one at a time, and it told me 100% of them had 0 issues. Like not even a bad cookie setting, not even a security header missing. I'm like, no, this doesn't make sense. And the devs are like, are you saying we're not good coders? I'm like, no, I'm saying you are human, and humans make mistakes sometimes.
Right.
And I test your web apps. And quite frankly, there's always at least one little thing that I can find, but usually way more. And I'm like, and the fact that I found nothing in 27, I'm sorry, that doesn't make sense. Something's wrong. And so I figured out since then that dynamic scanning tools, they suck if the API definition file is not complete. So this is the first lesson that I always teach when I consult. So I did this, Bryan. I did all the bad stuff that I tell devs not to do. I did all of it. I'm very guilty. So basically, when you create an API, and let's go back to the postal code thing. So you give me a postal code, and I'm going to send you a range of addresses. You send me an address, I'm going to throw you back the postal code. It's very simple. Cool. So I'll be a programmer, and I will be like definition, postal code, characters, let's say, or so this is a string. Cool. Mm-hmm. And then I'll just accept it, and then I'll go look something up in the database with it, and then I'll send back the value. And it works. So I'm a dev, so I publish it. This is cool. But a DAS looks at that definition file and it's like, I don't know what to do with this. It's a string. How long is the string? How short should the string be? Are you just allowing any character to be in the string? And so it will do things. So what you need to do is called linting. So linting is like a grammar checker for your code. And it's like, you are not allowed poetic license. You must be extremely specific. And I'm going to coach you into hardening this API because you have not finished the definition. So they just filled out the part that they need to make it function, but they didn't finish. And so it'll say stuff like, oh, okay, so this is a string. Cool. What's the minimum length? 5 characters for the United States, and Canada is 6. But let's just use US because it's easier. Okay, what's the maximum? 5 characters. Okay, what can those characters be? 0 through to 9. Don't accept anything else, just 0 through to 9, cool beans. Not 0 through to 9, 2 thumbs down. Then you've hardened your API, so it's more secure.
Right.
And then the dynamic scanner is like, oh, I know what to do now. And then it tries to expand upon those things to test to see where it can get. And then it will start finding things that are wrong. But if your definition file is kind of wonky, and a lot of them are out there, it doesn't know how to scan properly. And so once you start doing that, you can be good, basically. And suddenly you can aim any dynamic scanner at it, and it starts finding a ton of stuff. And so if you think your DAS sucks, lint your API file, and then try again.
Okay. Linting your API file. That's something to think about. Is that the documentation that a lot of developers don't take the time to want to do? Because it's, we've shipped it, hooray, it's all done. Or, I mean, is there anything that we should we be pushing back on that as, security folks, or as, who should be pushing back on that? Should the security folks be asking for that as part of like an SBOM, or, making sure the due diligence is being done, or is that the QA folks? Who should be looking for those or asking for those?
So I didn't know about this when I was a dev. And it wasn't until I was like, every dynamic scanner totally sucks at scanning APIs. And then I met this lady named Isabelle Mune, who she started 42 Crunch. And technically they're Bright's competitors, so I'm not supposed to talk about how awesome they are, but they're really awesome. And she made a linter and made it free to plug into your IDE. And I remember I opened up a thing with a client, and I was like, oh, this is what's wrong. Oh, this is what's wrong. This is what's wrong. Cool. And then I made Bright add one to their product. Nice. And I think a lot of DAS tools are adding that right now because they're all catching on to Isabel's amazing idea. But any linter, just if you open up so it's called a Swagger file or an open API definition file, sometimes called an API schema, whatever language you want to use, but open it up with a linter and walk through and take some advice. So it'll be like, we suggest this, consider it, please consider it. And so this could be part of the code review phase. You can plug it right into your IDE, some of them you have to upload it to their webpage, and then they'll tell you all the things that are wrong. Some of them will fix some of it for you. It depends on which one you choose. But basically, you lint that file, and then you've hardened your API so it's significantly more secure, and then you can run dynamic scanners that will be like, punch, 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 this is what's wrong. And then it'll start picking things up like, oh, there's some injection here or whatever. But dynamic scanners, I remember doing a thread maybe 2 years ago on Twitter, and I was like, does anyone know a dynamic scanner that can scan an API that doesn't suck? And just so many people were all like, they all suck, they all suck, they all suck. And then Isabel wrote me, and we'd already met, and she's like, I want to show you something. And I was like,
in the absence of is it because I've always heard it called they're Swagger files or open API files. If they don't have those, the alternative is that the pen testers or whatever have to create a fuzzing harness or something like that they can throw input against, right? I mean, and that takes a lot longer, and that's not available. Or obviously having those documentation makes the fuzzing a lot more efficient as well, and is more cost effective for either your red team or the third parties that have to come in and, do security assessment for your org. So, it does. Yeah, I get that. Was that a question? Yeah, I think that was a question.
Doing a truly black box test, I feel, is generally a waste of money.
Right.
Like, are you trying to test me and my quality as a tester? Or are you trying to test the application and get the absolute most bang for your buck? And so sometimes you do a pen test or a red team exercise because you want to scare the crap out of management, or you want to scare the crap out of the software developers and prove all the things that can be wrong. But generally, mostly people, they'll call it a pen test, but what they really want is an assessment of their security and as much advice as possible so that they can be better. Right. And so if you want to spend a ton of time, because I know pen testers where they'll get paid to string 5 little tiny vulnerabilities together into one giant exploit, and then they go and they steal a trophy and they show it to the CEO, and the CEO is like, oh my gosh, we have to take security seriously now. But first of all, I'm not a badass exploit writing hacker. I'm the nice, cuddly, Care Bear style AppSec person who wants to help you overall make all your apps more secure, following best practices. And if you want someone to shatter your applications, I know people you should hire who would be great at that, but I'm not the one. And that's okay. Yeah. We all have things we're awesome at. But I think that it's rare that that's what an organization needs. It's usually can you look at this application or this system or this network and tell us what's wrong, what's glaringly obvious, what we could make better? Can we have multiple defenses just in case? What should we look at for insider threats, etc.? So I feel sometimes pen tests are about glory and coolness and stuff you saw in a movie, rather than what is actually the most value for the business that you're working for or organization.
That was it for this episode of Breaking Down Security. I'd like to thank again Tanya for coming on and taking time. We'll be on next week, a little more content talking about API security. 10, actually, I think she said it was 13 things, but you'll hear about that next week. Just a little taste of what's going on there. So you can follow her, as I said earlier, on Twitter at SheHacksPurple. And you can find the BrakeSec podcast and broadcast on Twitter at BrakeSec, BrakeSec. You can find Miss Berlin at InfoSyster, INFOSYSTIR. She's also doing Hackers Health on Twitter and has a nonprofit dedicated to raising awareness of mental health issues in our community. So you can check out Hackers Health on Twitter as well. Mr. Boettcher is the developer of LogMD, which is a Windows forensics tool, setting up your logs for making sure that you can capture the logs that you need for your environment to help find things like malware and bad things happening on your network. And you can find him at log-md.com. He's also on Twitter at BetcherPwned. And you can follow me on Twitter at Bryan Brake. You can also join our Discord at discord.gg/BrakeSec. You can follow the instructions to get on and join our other fandom. You can also join our Slack as well, which you send us an invite to our Twitter, BrakeSec, and we will get you added once you accept the code of conduct and what have you. You can join us. We have a lot of different channels: threat intelligence, SIM and logging. We have a job board. We have a career advice board where people will look over resumes, and your the job board is fairly active right now. So even though there are quite a few companies that are in hiring freeze as of July 23rd, 2022. So I suggest, if you're looking for a new job or new opportunity, to go check that out. All right. Well, that was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Hope you enjoy your upcoming work week, and hope you take care of yourselves and be kind to one another. Do what you can to try to make a difference in the world, no matter how small. A little bit goes a long way at this point. And also to remind yourselves to take care of yourselves, because as we're fond of saying, you're the only you have. We'll talk to you soon.